Hi, my name is Matt Perez. I'm here with Jose Leal, my partner, and Andrew Tilling, who happens to live in Italy. And we're going to go through our usual conversation with Andrew, and really looking forward to talk about the the changes that are coming, and this is being part of. So, Andrew, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about your business and what are you doing in your business, and what are your clients doing?
Matt, Jose, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you guys. I think the big question of what we're doing is, in fact, something that a lot of people have known me for a long time are still trying to figure out. And I talk with a whole bunch of people in marketing trying to articulate it better as well. But for us right now, what we focus on at the Hive Change Consultancy is around transforming working cultures to deliver results that matter. So how does that pan out and what matters? But that often depends on the people that we're working with, and understanding a little bit about their story and what it is that they're trying to do. But essentially, for me, it's about trying to create a workplace where it doesn't matter what role you have, doesn't matter, in fact, what industry you're in, what business you're in, what role, everything that you do is somehow making a positive impact for future generations. I think it's really important to frame it in that way. It's good to make a positive impact. That's great. But if we are discounting future impacts in the decisions that we make, so for instance, it's like, yeah, great, we can transfer all this energy over here and build this wonderful infrastructure, and that's going to help all these people in these ways. But then we're taking away from future comfort of future generations of indeed the planet. Then that's a big future cost that we're discounting. So trying to factor in that very long-term view into day-to-day decision making can in fact be quite challenging, particularly when you're under pressure to deliver on quarterly results or hit that number. So often when we go in and work with a client and we're trying to create these positive performance and indeed increase profit, and a lot of our work with sales teams really does help in those kinds of ways. But it's this big question around why are we here, and why does what we do matter? And if we can kind of get our head into that, it becomes so much easier to get that kind of decision making where people instinctively know what a good choice is. And we're talking right down on the front line. And it seems kind of sensible. It seems to make sense. I mean, a lot of military organizations are all about kind of decentralizing that decision making and trying to bring it to the front line. And I know that you guys are all over this idea of kind of that co-decision making across the organization. But trying to align people's thinking and in such a way where they're still able to contribute diverse opinions creates all kinds of cultural tensions, which really struggle to play out when you've got a strong leadership structure or expectations about how things have always been done. So for me, me and my team, when we go on in, we spend an awful lot of time really trying to understand an organization, try to understand the challenges, try to understand where the real value they can deliver to the wider stakeholder environment is, and how they can do that better and in a way that also happens to be quite profitable too. So, that's the fun game that we play.
Yeah, actually, the way that we run companies today, in my view, is business hustle. It goes contrary to making money and growing things and stuff like that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. The name The Hive, where does that come from?
Well, really kind of working together better. I mean, we've got this kind of sign off, if you like, around collective intelligence. It's like that really everything we do kind of boils down to that. And a lot of people kind of think, well, hang on, isn't that groupthink? That's really dangerous. Well, yes, but what about group mind? And if you can bring in diversity of thinking and a freedom to challenge people's thinking, if you actually look at a beehive and you try to figure out, for instance, if they're going to swarm somewhere else, they do this wonderful behavior of kind of butting heads. It's like they've flown around. They think there's a good place to go and do a new hive over there or a new nest. And what they'll do is they'll come together and start butting heads in different directions until they kind of convince each other that actually, all right, then we've we've reached a consensus, we're going to go in that direction, and they'll take the new queen, and woof, they're off, but it's a decision-making process. It's not
Yes, that is.
of individuals, so we love that idea about bringing in diversity and challenging each other's thinking and bringing that into what we do. But for me, the biggest problem that I found when I started working in the corporate world, and I didn't always do that. I grew up in a very kind of social enterprise environment where my parents were running projects for benefiting the community. My mother's was all around theatre, so I got very much involved with performing arts, and I ended up being a professional actor running a youth theatre for the first kind of 7 years of my professional life, and I worked on all these different projects and did lots of work with kids who are at risk of falling into crime and all that kind of stuff, and loved all that work. Had a bit of a crisis of I don't know, belief in the industry. It just didn't resonate with me. I wanted to do something different, so I traveled for a bit, had a good look at the world, and kind of came back and had my first professional job was working with fundraising for all kinds of different organizations like Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace and Amnesty International and all these incredible organizations. Learned a lot about their stories and about human rights and the challenges that we're facing as a world. But with all these amazing people, super smart, very passionate, couldn't seem to get anything done. Yes. Right? I mean, in this theater environment, it was like, look, you're under high pressure. There's no budget. You've got these talents of varying skills, and we've still got a job to do, and we need to get it done by this deadline, and we find a way to do it. Feast or famine, we find a way. But something within this professional, structured environment, all these people that I assumed were super smart, super intelligent, knew all these wonderful things and ways to operate that were a bit alien to me. I just felt that the more I stayed there, the less effective I got. And it was like, something's wrong here, So I really did kind of bake my noodle on it, and I did manage to lead a bit of a culture change with some extraordinary people working in this organization, and we doubled results. We raised 27 million pounds, almost 35,000, I guess, dollars in that 1 year worth of donations that were long-term donations. And I thought, I kind of came away from that and I thought, right, there's a consultancy here. There's something about collaboration. There's something about working together and thinking together better. And together with my wife, we founded this organization to primarily help with social enterprise. And then we started looking at corporates. But because of a documentary called The Corporation, which I don't know if you guys, it's an award-winning documentary, very, very powerful. But the idea that it put forward was that if you look at the characteristics of psychopathy, all right, so things like glib and superficial charm, lack of remorse or guilt, a lack of realistic goals, all kinds of different things, and also a callous lack of empathy. If you map these behavior traits against the legal entity that is known as a corporation, actually you can see in many cases instances of this psychopathic behavior, which kind of suggests that it's systemic, right? And this had a really profound effect on me. And in fact, the guy who created the structure, so Robert Hare, I mean, he came out and he said, well, look, hang on, that's kind of not what I was saying. That's not where I was going. And in fact, it's not that everybody who's a corporation is a psychopath, but in fact, you can see these elements, and maybe some could display that as a bit of an exercise. And so, okay, so it's been kind of tempered back. But then recently you look at it and it's like, suddenly you've got, the percentage is, I've got it here, between 4 and 12% of CEOs exhibit psychopathic traits. And it's like, okay, so hang on, is it the institution that we're going into? Is it the role of just being in power that's kind of making us behave this way? Or is it that people with these traits get into these positions of power? But what is it that's meaning that we're having this blatant disregard for the truth in recognizing our responsibilities of our impact, or recognizing the real challenges that we face with regards to climate, something I'm very passionate about, or indeed rights of the workers and all those different aspects. Why do we ignore them in the pursuit of this idea of profit, when really these are very real needs, they're very real issues, and they're by definition of market means there's profit and opportunity there if we embrace them and lean into them, right?
Yes.
So for me, I kind of thought, right, we've got to figure out a way of, how do you treat someone with psychopathic traits? And for me, that was all around empathy. And so I kind of made it a personal mission to bring in empathy into organizations. How do you bake it in? How do you bring not shareholder choices but stakeholder needs into the heart of decision making? Which can include shareholders, right? But that broader stakeholder environment, and be that whether it's decentralizing ownership, which I know is something that you guys are very passionate about, to shared ownership models, to the Patagonia model of, hey, let's give it to the earth, whatever those choices may be. If we can look at it as how we make a positive impact within the people who are affected by what we do, and use empathy as the mother of innovation. So if necessity is the mother of invention, then an empathy for other people's needs can inspire great innovation that can scale and grow, deliver outstanding results. So that's kind of what's been baking my noodle for the last 2 decades.
You talk about empathy. Do you see empathy as something that is innate to us, or do you see it's something we need to teach people? What's your view on what is empathy? Because that I think alters the way we approach that line of thinking, right?
For sure. So I didn't know this about me, but it's taken me a while to understand. But I exhibit traits of high sensitivity. So I'm wired biologically, there's nothing I can do about it, to feel or experience other people's states or changes in state. That just gives me this kind of a bit of an awareness of the room, which kind of helped me read the room when I was teaching, helps me read the room when I was performing, helps me read the room when I'm facilitating and training now.
And being interviewed.
Well, it depends. I mean, I may have completely missed this one. I don't know, but it makes me kind of feel, and it took me a while to figure out what was my feeling and what was other people's for a while. It kind of left me pretty confused, to be honest, in high stress scenarios. But over the years, I kind of learned to realize that, okay, there's differing states in the room. There's people are responding to different situations differently, or to the same situation differently. And by understanding that and factoring that in, I can make better decisions as a leader. So in an environment where we are agreeing to work together and collaborate towards working towards a goal, if I can just build in a communication point that says, do you know what? I don't feel comfortable with what it is that you've just said, or that brings up some fear in me, or do you know what? I'm worried about that, or I'm really excited about that, and this sounds like the best idea ever. But if we can voice those things without fear of repercussions, because I think fear and blame is a big kind of part of the problem, right? Yes. Then we can really start getting better information about how our different choices are going to impact people. And what that helps us to do is identify a bit about what's important to people. And we can name that, and we've got good words for that around values, in our culture, by identifying different values and conflicting values of different stakeholders within our environment. And by factoring those into our decision making, we can start allowing ourselves to be influenced by more than the guiding tenets of our organization, or indeed our role. And when I came on to speak with you guys, it was around this idea of our leaders, as leaders, should we be letting go of control, right? Because it's it's a terrifying thing to let go and suddenly have people that we, in some cases, we're not even connected with. You know, we've got people in between us and them, and they're out on the front line, and they are, you know, interacting with our customers. And you know, if I haven't got control over them as a leader, then surely I'm somehow putting myself at risk or failure. And I saw it really play out during the pandemic when some clients that we work with, out of sheer necessity or need or concern, adopted the command and control structure from something that had been quite loose before. And it was often cases very effective for the first wave, because everybody recognized there was this big, and everyone kind of suspended their need to be autonomous, to contribute in a different way in the spirit of the cause.
Suspended disbelief.
Exactly that, right? And then we move into this idea of, all right, then, well, second wave, well, come on, guys, we're going to keep on controlling because we've got to do it, you know? And then you get this kind of like, oh, all right. And then third wave, it's like, do you know what? I'm done. I'm absolutely done. So, for my experience, what that's seen is that we suddenly got this big pushback that said, if this carries on, if you keep this culture in place, I'm out and I'm looking for somewhere where I can be more fulfilled, where I can be contributing and own that contribution. And I think as we move, as we have a different way of kind of thinking and working, collaborating, as new generations come through who are very aware of the wider impacts of business in the world, and they've been brought up knowing that sustainability is a very real concern, that people have got the right to be themselves, you know, and to live their lives as they so choose, you know, with their values and their choices. You know, as we start recognizing these things and we start bringing them into an organization, people aren't just going to accept a cultural reality or accept.
Andrew, I want to take it back because you were describing the current situation, and you said if we can only get these people to lose control and to be more empathic and stuff like that, but the system, the overall system that they live in, and the reason they made it to CEO or whatever it is based on competition. The system is based on that, what do you call it, psychopathic behavior.
Yeah.
Because who wins when all the brutes get on the field is the guy who's the bigger brute, right? The guy with the biggest stick kills everybody else and he ends up on top. So in a sense, by having them be empathic and stuff like that, things may work better below that position, but things with the board will not work as well, because the answers, when they say, how come we're not making this, or we're not doing that, or we're not making the margin, or whatever it is, the answer is not going to make sense to them if it comes from empathy and it comes from, you know, making people feel good, making people feel more playful, which is part of innovation. So, and that's one of the big challenges in making the transition, right? People who want to make the change, but they can't because they live in a system where they can't afford to make the change. What do you say to that?
About three different things, so bear with me while I try to unpack them. Number one, I mean, culturally, I think that empathy is extraordinarily powerful in a sales environment. You build that into the culture of your organization. If you understand and can understand at a very deep level the challenges of your customer, then you are able to provide, not even just provide the new solutions or innovate, but tailor the way that you communicate the value that you are selling to that customer.
I agree.
And so that they can, so it resonates with them, and they are more likely to adopt it and apply those solutions, and they get so much more benefit and value out of it as a result. So
and they become more loyal customers, to use a bad word, in the sense that, you know, they know they're understood by you, and so in the sales environment it makes perfect sense. Try to explain that to a traditional sales people, and it doesn't play. It doesn't go very far.
not without a sales culture transformation program, which has been something we've
Yes.
been building up
Yeah.
with Drive, because people don't get it. They want the short-term win because they've been conditioned to get the short-term wins.
Right.
And trying to break that down and kind of look more long tail, it doesn't mean that you can't build in short-term wins, but it's about trying to understand how they're part of a bigger program, trying to build those deeper connections. And to be honest, salespeople who go with that focus of just get the short-term win are effectively order taking. It's about connecting people with something that they want and then finalizing the deal, which will be automated if it's not already within the next 2 to 3 years.
Right.
Unless you are making that human connection, really you're doing yourself out of a job. But I do think that there's great profitability in bringing empathy and understanding to your stakeholder environment and building stronger and more effective joint ventures and partnerships as a result. So I think there's a lot of profit there. So that's kind of number one. Number two, you mentioned playfulness. So I have I do a martial art called capoeira, but I say do. What we say is we play this game called capoeira, and I've studied capoeira for best part of 17 years now with the London School of Capoeira, Mr. Silvia Bazzarelli and Marcos dos Santos, and two very inspiring people. And what I found with capoeira is the objective of capoeira is not to win. You go into the roda where the game takes place and you play and you have an exchange with your partner. It's often non-contact, but you do make it very clear that you could make contact, or indeed, it's non-contact if you don't get out of the way, basically. But if you, when you play that game, you've got masters who have played for decades playing with people who have played for months. Mm-hmm. And yet somehow there is this exchange. And what's really special is that both learn. Because the objective of the game is to have a good game.
Yes.
Now, I've used that to help train negotiation for years. That not go in there with a win-lose attitude, that I've got to beat you to get the best out of this negotiation. We've got to find a win-win solution that works for everybody. And that requires communication, and that requires, empathy and openness and vulnerability and all those very human things, which I agree can disappear the minute you go into an organization or a system, which is then all about competition. But not every, I think sometimes we forget, and bear in mind that I work with many very many inspiring people from the States who exhibit all kinds of very progressive and very grounded and very sensible thinking in what they do. But the classic United States model of sports is that win-lose, and you bring that also into business. I'm captain in my team, therefore I will promote you in this organization because clearly you are a good leader. Well, not always, right? Right. There's other forms of games, and there's other forms of play, and there's other forms of creativity, and there's other forms of exploration and experimentation.
But there's only one form of organizing that's systemic right now, right? And that, what we call fiat, is a system of not only do we compete, my organization against your organization, my market share against your market share, or everybody else's market share, but we as individuals against each other, our departments against each other's departments, and my role against your role. And I mean, we climb the corporate ladder. It's literally by pulling someone else's feet out from underneath them to get up the corporate ladder. There is no other way to climb the corporate ladder unless you're either pulling somebody off the ladder or you're climbing over their back. So that system is what we're talking about. Is that, I know we're kind of being a little direct here, but does that feel right to you?
Well, it's Margaret Hefferman's Super Chicken's TED Talk, isn't it? That if you go through with this Super Chicken model, which is recruiting to your team only the highly driven overachievers, then it ends up being counterproductive because there's a hyper competitive in the group dynamic, as you've expressed. And I think that looking at systems where when one wins, more, everybody wins. It's that team dynamic. I mean, for me, compensation plans, for instance, in the sales team, are often all about how many leads you can steal off your friends. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, that can't be the way forward. Whereas if you look at it, that there are shared team goals that we can participate in, I think that helps, which is why I think co-ownership is so very attractive, because you can, give everybody responsibility for that win. But I think it goes beyond.
Not give. That's part of our mentality, is we say, we give this thing to someone else.
We suggest I own it in the first place, right?
Right.
Which I love. And I think it kind of plays into this idea of, the impact that I want to create and help in the world. I know that I can't deliver that impact on my own.
No.
It would be narcissistic to suggest that it would, and a serious case of white savior syndrome, right? So how do we deal with that? And for me, that means that I have to empower other people to go and
we have
deliver
to empower each other.
And
that's the trick. We need to empower each other, right? Because
see,
you empowering others will only work if they can empower you.
Where the exchange comes in.
Exactly.
Which is where I learned from playing a junior member of the capoeira team, as well as I learned from playing a master.
Yes.
There is an exchange that takes place.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful dynamic.
I read, I think this morning, that they put caps on people to track their brain activity, and there were students and teachers, and the teacher would have a short lecture, and people learned the most. People learned when their brains were in sync, and people whose brain was more in sync with instructor learned the most, and they then passed it on, and which is very close to the idea of adjacent learning, which is a concept in education, which is you learn more from a guy that's a little bit ahead of you than from a guy who's miles away from you, because it's easier to get in sync with that person. And capoeira and all the rest of most of the martial arts are that way, where you're learning from each other. And in the case of karate, when my kids were little, they obviously couldn't compete with the big guy, right? But they did. And what the big guy would do, and you could see it because it was always, they found their weaknesses and didn't exploit the weaknesses. They exploited their strength. And I thought that was beautiful. So when you start talking about martial arts, I thought, yep, that's beautiful. And but it's this idea that we're all helping each other to go forward, to move, and going back to the fiat hierarchy. And by the way, fiat means because I said so. So
like fiat currency, right? It's like it's so it is.
It's the dollar because I say so. Nixon said it's a dollar, it's a dollar. And there's no gold backing or anything like that, which was a stupid thing to begin with. But anyways, so the fiat hierarchy kind of gets in the way of that. And I applaud your effort to try to make transformation from a point of view of getting smaller wins in sales and this and that, and then bring it all up to a CEO who can then find a way to communicate with the board. That's very important. The board represents the owners, and they're the ultimate bosses. And so that's got to be part of the formula is how to make that transition. But in the end, we don't see any lasting solution with the fiat hierarchy still in place. As long as you have a fiat hierarchy, I can always say, I'm the new CEO, and everything that went before me was total bullshit, and we're going to do with all that. We're going to do things by the book, and so that's the problem with fiat hierarchy and the owners behind it.
Well, it's a permissive structure, right? You allow, everyone else allows the individual who gets fiated into place to be the one that has the answers, to be the one that makes the decisions. And we just sit back, wait for that person to make their decisions, and that's the system we live in. And so, my question to you, Andrew, is how do you deal with that as you're progressing within the organization? You're working with sales, and obviously you've got the sales director or VP or something of that nature, working within their environment, but then having a different type of relationship with the C-suite, and them having a different relationship with the investors or the board. Where do you see that line? How do you deal with that?
Well, I think what we're talking to is essentially values conflicts. It's like what are the priorities of different people within the organization, which come about whether you are an acting troupe that is trying to figure out how they're going to get through the week on a tight budget, to dealing with the value conflicts of a board and the people who are delivering the services to the customers.
Okay.
And
yeah.
so I think there's identifying what those values are and mapping out those conflicts, I think, is a really important part of what we do. And we have a process that we use called the STORM process, which begins with understanding your stakeholder environment. It's what's your current situation from the perspective of all the different stakeholders involved, and trying to understand what happens if nothing changes with regards to the issue you're looking to address. So understanding what their trajectory is, what their resources are, intel, value, empathy that we're bringing to the table in order to address this particular challenge. And once we've got a sense of that situation, then we're going to start shaping a target which actually aligns with the values and what's important to the various different stakeholders that we've as a group collectively moved to the center of our focus. So it becomes less about the shareholders say this, so it's that, right? And it becomes more about, well, these are the people who are central to that issue. And these are the values which are important to them. Therefore, that must inform what we see a solution to look like, and that's super powerful. So, and I've spotted a question that's come out with people asking, what's the top 3 things to bring a project to fruition in the most effective way? A really clear sense of where you are and where you want to be from a stakeholder's perspective, from a diverse stakeholder's perspective, I think is absolutely crucial. We've got to define the gap in a healthy, broader view. So that's definitely number 1.
So do you bring the investors or the owners or whatever, the board basically, into the conversation as well, or?
In some cases, yeah. In fact, we had a really interesting moment where I was working with an organization that were looking to rebuild their vision and mission for a reinvention of the organization due to various different challenges they've experienced. And I remember a VC was in the mix who had some investment in the organization, and we were talking about the team and the various different challenges, and the argument was kind of like, look, they were making was look, just forget trying to do anything inspiring, just copy what your competitors are doing and take their website headings and recognize those are your priorities and just impose that on a new market, and away you go, keep it simple. And we were talking about the team and what they were invested in and what they wanted to do. And, I just saw him write this note, just basically saying F team. It's just irrelevant, And I was just like, wow, but you know what? When that guy left, having voiced his thoughts, it's amazing how complete polar opposite direction everybody went for. Everybody went. Because it was actually, do you know what? If that's we're going to create something so damn compelling that you can't say no to it, because this is what we want to do. Because if the alternative is so uninspiring and flat, there's no purpose there. It's just money. But if we want to invest all this resource and talent, then let's do something really worthwhile. And it's incredible what they're doing. But that shared sense of purpose, that real communicable sense of why, is the second thing that I would say needs to be in there. So yes, sometimes we do include people with those, who are shareholders and they do have a clear perspective, but it's really also powerful to see their mind shift once they get closer to the people who are involved in that day to day, and what you can learn from those Well, I think the mirror neurons that are perhaps firing some of that connection that you were talking about, Matt, with regards to, learning from someone who's kind of just a step ahead rather than someone who's way ahead. If you've got more connections there, more transfers. So bringing people into a space where transference can take place is a really big part of the discussion, which is sitting in circle, which is something we've done since we came out of the caves, right? It's we know how
we
it
used
works.
to do it in the caves.
And in the caves, indeed. It was perhaps more cozy there as well,
I know we're running out of time, Andrew, but I want to ask a question, because you said it earlier, aligned values, and for some time now, I've been wondering if that's really the answer to bringing people together. And something occurred to me today as you said aligned values. I wonder if this resonates for you. Is it aligned values as much as it is aligned perception? Is it that we are bringing to ourselves this approach of what do we see together that then brings about this resonance of where we are? And we talk more about what we see. We see the impact. We see the people for what they are. We see the empathy with which we are connecting with people. And that aligned awareness is really where we might then say, oh, we have an aligned set of values or an aligned set of principles or whatever that might be. Does that resonate for you? I've never had this thought, but it was your words that spurred that in my mind today.
So a couple of things on that. Yes, it really does. For me, the target setting, if you like, of where it is that we want to go, we use 4 Ps, which is the first of all, purpose, why we're here. The second is the parameters. So in other words, those values that inform the parameters that we are going to be creative within. And so therefore those values also sometimes in conflict, because that creates beautiful creative tension, right? Then inform that perception, which is the third P. So I love that you use those words, right? And that perception, it goes deeper than just vision. It's what we see, hear, feel, got a sense of what we're articulating in our own mind, as we bring this vision about. And then once we've kind of gone deep there and everybody's contributing to that, what we then do is we create a pinpoint moment, something which proves to us that everything that we're trying to achieve has taken place. Now, we then articulate that, pin that, really get that kind of sense of where we are and where we want to be. But here's the crucial thing. For leaders, we then let go of the how. It's about asking people who have now bought into that journey. Tell us the story. Let's celebrate every evidence that we can find that suggests that you're capable of doing it, that it's happening, that change is happening, that positive impact is taking place, that we're moving along, that our situation has moved. Always about doing everything you can to lend whatever influence you have, because it is by doing that you see all that influence and impact and profit, be that through financial or indeed sense of accomplishment, land in that team that you are working with. And it's that shared experience that you've played your role in, that they have delivered with you. And that shared experience for me is the true definition of what a company is.
Yeah, I love when Matt and I were writing the book. Oh, I got it on the wrong side. The book. One of the things that you talk about different values and conflict. One of the things that we conflicted on was our view of using the word company or not, or companies. And Matt pointed out that he loves companies because it means it comes from breaking bread together. Right?
Compound. Yeah.
Right. And so we've lost that. Right. But coming back around to that, where we are breaking bread together and not I'm an employee, of this fiat system that I need to obey in order to be able to have my bread. It's a very different way of thinking about what a company is, right? Breaking bread together means that we share the bread, not that the bread that I take home is based on whether I'm permitted to or not. And that's, I think, the work that you're doing is making that difference, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I certainly hope so. And, or rather, I certainly hope that somehow I can contribute to helping the leaders and the facilitators and my team do that. It's their impact. It's their vision. You know, I've in many ways kind of said, hey, look, this is how I think we can work together. What can we do with that? And that vision and that goal that I articulated earlier on, that's come from my team, you know, my team.
Yes,
And
yes,
it's come from the team.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, we've baked in things into the legal structure, like, you know, we the decisions that we make are made for the benefit of the stakeholders involved in the impact, so that that's in there. That gives me a little bit more of a sense of reassurance that how we start this little organization and as we grow it out, it's going to be able to keep some of those principles in mind. But I want to really credit you guys, because I mean, I remember reading the 15 commitments of conscious leadership, which was the most difficult and yet easy to understand book I've ever read. You know, it's like difficult because it really challenged me. But I really had a similar reaction in reading your work and having a sense of the very simple observation that you've made, but the profound impacts it makes in terms of helping us rethink and to step away from what is very clear when you can see it, a system which really doesn't work, and
Yes.
to think bigger and bolder and more collaboratively and more open, and have a clearer sense of the and consciousness of the impacts that we make as individuals in this world, and particularly when we work so collectively with such tremendous potential for impact as a company can create. Having a sense of those responsibilities and rethinking and doing so in a more responsible way is something which I think is long overdue. So my compliments to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
So next week's guest is Edgar Horse, founder of GOTT, Gathering of the Tribe, the Conscious Fellowship. Don't know much about it, so we hope to learn more from Edgar, and looking forward to that. And this has been terrific. I'm really, because what you're doing, by the way, trying to transform corporations, not small companies starting from scratch kind of thing, but big corporation, is a bigger challenge that I've been willing to take on. So we have a lot to learn from you, and your background, I think, is perfect for that kind of endeavor. The theater and the social thinking and stuff like that, I think it'll came together in the right place at the right time. So looking forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, and learning more.
And learning more. Yeah.
And likewise, I from you both. Thank you so much, really, for your insights and for inviting me onto this forum. It's been really interesting to really raise my thinking to somehow contribute to your own. So I deeply appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.